It's 5:04 and welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Over the weekend, the National Association of Letter Carriers Union organized demonstrations nationwide to protest DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and their efforts to find cost-cutting and management improvements within the United States Postal Service. 7 locations in North Carolina were designated as protest spots, 2 of the largest taking place in Raleigh and Charlotte. The protests follow a request from DOGE help by the U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy of Greensboro, North Carolina. In a letter to lawmakers earlier this month, DeJoy said that the USPS dual mandate of being financially self-sustaining with universal delivery has made the need for reforms urgent over the agency. He said that his own reform plan, known as the Deliver for America Act, is stalled due to intense scrutiny from lawmakers, historic mismanagement within the Postal Service, and layers of regulation and bureaucracy. The Postal Service generally receives no tax dollars for operating expenses and relies on selling postage stamps, products, and services to fund its operations. More than 533,000 individuals are employed by the U.S. Postal Service, including around 11,000 here across the state of North Carolina. In working with the Department of Government Efficiency, DeJoy said that USPS needs to review more than 30,000 retail lease locations, unfunded mandates from Congress, mismanagement of the USPS retirement and workers' compensation plan, alongside an array of regulatory burdens that the Postmaster General say interfere with the $78 billion service's ability to operate efficiency. In a letter DeJoy sent to the Postal Regulatory Commission, which was established in the 1970s, he says, quote, "It is important to me that Congress and the public understand that the DOGE engagement is not expansive, but directed. As a hands-on leader of this organization for almost 5 years now, and one who is designated and implemented with good progress a cost and operational transformation of my own, I am not adverse to offers for help that move us in the direction that we are already traveling. As part of the work with DOGE, DeJoy is moving forward with 10,000 staff reductions throughout voluntary retirement within the Postal Service, with DeJoy also announcing his own retirement in February. He was appointed to the post back in May of 2020. So the Department of Government Efficiency taking a look at what is going on within the Postal Service. We'll have more details on the protests that took place over the weekend in both Raleigh and Charlotte coming up here in just a couple of minutes right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:08, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We are tracking some legislation out of Raleigh this morning as it relates to Certificate of Need. To get some details on that legislation and what Certificate of Need is and why it's relevant to you, Jeff Moore from CarolinaJournal.com joins us this morning on the News Hour. Jeff, before we get into some ongoings in Raleigh, can you explain Certificate of Need to our audience across the Charlotte Metro this morning?
Yeah, so basically the Certificate of Need laws in North Carolina is kind of like a permission slip system for establishing a healthcare facility or expanding your services by buying new equipment or adding beds to a hospital. It is a bureaucratic regulatory regime to kind of dictate how much different healthcare is going to different parts of the state. It's kind of a vestige of a federal system that used to be nationwide, but they actually figured out it didn't work so well. So they got rid of the federal system in the 80s, I believe, but there are several states, North Carolina being one of them, that still has Certificate of Need laws. And so if a doctor's office wanted to open up a surgery center or a hospital wanted to add 20 beds to its intensive care unit, they would have to obtain a Certificate of Need from that bureaucracy in order to do so.
And so knowing that, what is some of this legislation that is being worked through by Republicans in both the House and the Senate?
Yeah, so we've got some companion bills in the legislature. And the Senate side is Senate Bill 370. And we spoke with Senator Benton Sawrey out of Johnston County, a Republican there who's a primary sponsor on that legislation. and we've got the companion in the House is House Bill 455. And this is a full repeal of the Certificate of Need laws that are in the general statute books in North Carolina. There have been piecemeal kind of reforms to Certificate of Need. They have taken some services out, added some in, and it made small adjustments along the way. But there's been a kind of a long running opposition to Certificate of Need by independent healthcare providers. There have been several lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of the Certificate of Need laws. So this would repeal those laws in their entirety. It's just a wholesale repeal. It would get rid of those statutes. It would redefine some kind of statutory definitions of like a healthcare facility, for instance, because lots of those definitions actually refer to the Certificate of Need regime. It would take that language out and give a standalone definition for a healthcare facility. Nothing wild. It would be hospitals and inpatient, outpatient centers, things like that, surgery centers, typical healthcare facilities, but it would remove all the Certificate of Need language. And so you would no longer have to go through this rigmarole of bureaucratic approval to get a permission slip to open up a new facility, like an imaging facility. If you wanted to offer CT scans and MRI scans to patients at a more economical price, that's something that now you would have to go through, get a Certificate of Need. Your competitors in your area, in your county, may actually have a vote on whether or not you get that permission slip. So they would get rid of that, and hopefully, the sponsors hope it would allow for more proliferation of healthcare offerings in the state, and with more supply, you would actually be able to lower the prices, because North Carolina suffers under some of the highest healthcare costs in the nation.
Yeah, we've covered some of those stories over the last couple of months in regards to those high healthcare costs. And Jeff, you mentioned this permission slip style system. From what I understand with some of the issues in regards to Certificate of Need is that even healthcare companies that are not interested in building out services go to the state, request the certificate, and then don't build it, essentially boxing other individuals out of the market that would want to bring those various services to whatever area across the state it might be.
Yeah, it really sets up a system that can be used for kind of protectionist measures like that. There was some legislation proposed that would actually carve out some of those grievances where you would have an expiration to your Certificate of Need. So a big hospital system couldn't gobble up the Certificate of Needs in that area, certificates of need, and then because they have a rationing system there, the bureaucracy may think, well, we already have 5 certificates of need out there. They're in process, and we don't have any more to issue. But those big systems may not have any intention of actually building out that facility. It's used as kind of a blocking and tackling measure so their competition can't come along and open up a new facility that would steal some of their business, as it were. So there's been some proposals to carve that out. And there's been lots of proposals over the years to kind of adjust what kind of services Certificate of Need really touches. But this would kind of get rid of the scalpel of carving out like chiropractors or rehabilitation facilities or this or that healthcare service, and just get rid of the whole con regime for Certificate of Need. So you wouldn't require any of those things, and we could get some higher levels of healthcare access across the state. There has been opposition from the Hospital Association for years that has kept the Certificate of Need laws in place. They've argued that they need that kind of protection because without it, they may have patients that come and pay for some more of their premium services going elsewhere, and then they won't have the resources to actually serve the community. We've not seen that come to pass in some of the other markets that have gotten rid of Certificate of Need laws, and so critics of the con laws say that that's kind of an overblown worry. But so far in North Carolina, that's been a successful lobbying effort by the hospitals to keep Certificate of Need laws in place.
And Jeff, as we wrap up our conversation this morning, is it safe to say that if there was greater flexibility in regards to individuals or companies rather opening these various facilities, that would of course increase some of the supply there and hopefully lower costs, as you noted earlier, which is a major issue and in many cases a budget buster for North Carolina families, healthcare costs?
Yeah, for sure. And if you can just think of one example that a lot of people have experience with is if you ever had to pay for an imaging scan of some type, like an MRI, even with insurance coverage, you're paying through the nose for scans like that. But the MRI technology has been around for a long time. And there are many outfits actually interested in purchasing scanning machines like that and offering them to their markets at a more economical price, but they have been blocked by the certificate of need laws, and they've pursued some of those things in court to see if they can get it overturned. And we have one court case that's actually going on right now to that effect. It's an eye surgeon, I believe, that's going after the certificate of need laws. But if you were to get rid of that regime, no doubt you would have a lot more access to healthcare. You'd have a lot more healthcare providers coming into communities in North Carolina offering their services that they think they can do at a better price, better quality than some of the other offerings. And so if you open the market up, then the free market is going to provide exactly what we would expect it to.
A very important update this morning. We appreciate it. Jeff Moore from CarolinaJournal.com joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:15, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get a look at traffic on your Tuesday morning. A look at the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good morning.
on WBT.
Hot.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. We're heading back to Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts coming up Wednesday, April the 16th from 7 to 9 p.m. for WBT's News and Brews, and we'd, of course, love to see you there. All of your WBT friends will be there to raise a glass with you and talk about the news and issues of the day. It's WBT's News and Brews headed your way Wednesday, April the 16th at Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts. Get tickets and event details this morning by visiting our website, WBT.com. There's a big banner right there on the homepage. Cheers, and we look forward to seeing you Wednesday, April the 16th at Heist Brewery and Barrel Arts. And welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We continue to track some wildfires that continue to burn throughout the western half of North Carolina. Two large fires, both burning in Polk County this morning. Combined, they are close to almost 5,000 acres. And with the latest information provided by the North Carolina Forest Service, this is as of about 7 o'clock last night. Both of those fires are burning well over 5,000 acres this morning are still uncontained, 0% containment, as those are burning in the Green River game land, not far from Henderson out in western North Carolina. Just to continue to provide you updates on that, that is causing some air quality issues. This as a burn ban continues to remain in effect for all of North Carolina, all 100 counties, due to the elevated risk of fire across the state from the Tennessee border all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. So those fires still burning this morning, according to the North Carolina Forest Service. We'll continue to keep an eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Back to the Department of Government Efficiency and some protests in North Carolina over the weekend. This is due to the United States Postmaster General Louis DeJoy of North Carolina, who has been leading USPS since 2020, has asked the Department of Government Efficiency to find cost-cutting and management improvements within the Postal Service. That prompted a weekend of protests across the country. Two big protest spots in North Carolina included Raleigh and Charlotte. USPS efficiency has been long criticized. In the last fiscal year, the agency lost over $9.5 billion, up from $6.5 billion the year prior. And right after the November election, then President-elect Donald Trump floated the idea of merging the agency with the U.S. Department of Commerce. This weekend's protests by the NALC union, dubbed the Hell No Day of Action, was held to draw attention to fears that the Postal Service could be privatized. Union leaders said that privatization or reforms could lead to job losses and reduction in service to rural communities, as well as undermining the service's public mission. However, critics argued that the real risk is the continuation of a bloated, inefficient system that fails to meet the needs of the modern and fast-paced economy, and that embraces market-driven solutions with competition will long ensure the sustainability long-term of the Postal Service. Mitch Kokai with the John Locke Foundation, who is our senior policy analyst, said, quote, with the U.S. Postal Service's annual loss jumping from $6.5 billion to $9.5 billion, a whopping 46% in a single year, something has to change. He went on to say the best solution might be to privatize the entire operation. If that's not possible, some major reconstruction must take place to put postal operations on a more sustainable path. North Carolina, I'll remind you, is a right-to-work state, which ensures that workers are not required to join a union as a condition of hiring or continued employment, fostering an environment where businesses and employees can negotiate freely. Mitch Kokai continued by saying the NALC is ignoring the reality in an attempt to preserve a system that cannot continue as it is right now. The union's protests remind us of the importance of North Carolina's status as a right-to-work state. Flexible labor markets help businesses avoid the systemic problems that the Postal Service must deal with today. The Department of Government Efficiency, a major conversation at the national level this morning and has been over the last couple of weeks, and it does continue here in North Carolina as well. Turning our attention to the North Carolina General Assembly in the footsteps of the Department of Government Efficiency in Washington, D.C. Senate Republicans yesterday in the North Carolina General Assembly have introduced the DAVE Act. Senate Leader Phil Berger filed Senate Bill 474, also known as the DAVE Act, which creates a division of accountability, value, and efficiency within the state auditor's office. The bill requires each state agency to report to Dave on how the agency spends taxpayer funds and instructs Dave Bolick, the state auditor, to put together a report by the end of this year on which state agencies and jobs can be eliminated from state government. Senate Leader Phil Berger said in a press release that it's time to take a look and make sure that state government is working efficiently and effectively, saying, quote, "We want our state agencies to work as hard as the citizens that fund them. Taking a comprehensive look at state agency spending and staffing to determine if they're working efficiently and effectively is the right thing to do. If they won't hold themselves accountable, then the General Assembly will." Primary sponsor Senator Steve Jarvis, the Republican out of Davidson County, says that it's important for taxpayers to know that their money is being well spent. He said in a press release, quote, "We want North Carolinians to know that their tax dollars are being spent wisely, and this audit will shed much-needed light on agency operations. It is imperative that we take a critical look at what those tax dollars are being used for so we can root out any waste and get rid of any bureaucratic bloat within state government." We talked about this in great detail over the last couple of weeks. In the March Carolina Journal poll, over 51% of North Carolina voters said that they were in favor of creating an agency like DOGE. The question we asked in our poll was, should the state government create a Department of Government Efficiency? 51.9 said yes, 40.6 said no, with about 5.5% being, or rather 7.6% rather, being unsure with whether they wanted to move forward with a state agency like the nature of DOGE up in Washington, D.C. Getting some quotes from other lawmakers this morning includes Senator Tim Moffitt, who said it's past time for a full-scale examination of state government operations. As a business owner, I know how important it is to look for savings in every nook and cranny that you can. This review will give us a better idea of how we can more efficiently run the state and serve our citizens. This, of course, piggybacks on some comments from Governor Josh Stein as well during his State of the State address. Back a couple of weeks ago, he hinted at and said that he would be instructing individuals under his direction in the governor's office to create a similar entity to the Department of Government Efficiency. So parallel avenues taking place right now. However, this legislation, Senate Bill 474, was introduced yesterday in the North Carolina Senate. We'll keep an eye on that as it makes its way through the North Carolina General Assembly over on our website, carolinajournal.com, and of course right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:29, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Time to get another look at traffic on your early Tuesday morning commute. A look at the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 5:35. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Keeping an eye on some legislation out of Raleigh this morning. North Carolina lawmakers have introduced legislation to repeal the state's Certificate of Need laws, or CON. Those regulate the establishment and expansion of healthcare facilities. These laws require providers to obtain state approval before adding hospital beds, building new facilities, or purchasing major medical equipment, a process that critics say drive up costs and restrict access to health care. Senate Bill 370 and House Bill 455, companion bills in the General Assembly, propose a full repeal of the CON framework effective January the 1st of 2026. Proponents argue that eliminating CON will allow market forces to drive healthcare decisions rather than bureaucratic oversight. While legal challenges against CON remain ongoing, lawmakers pushing the repeal believe that the state should not act as a gatekeeper for healthcare expansion. One of the primary bill sponsors, Senator Brenton Sawyer, the Republican out of Johnston County, told the Carolina Journal, quote, "North Carolina's Certificate of Need laws are generally unnecessary and antiquated. There are a few places that reform and tweaks make sense, but on the whole, we need to toss out the current regulatory scheme and let the market drive these decisions." He followed up by saying our hospitals and health businesses are sophisticated enough to determine whether need exists to stand up new outpatient facilities or to purchase equipment. The state does not need to play gatekeeper, which only adds costs that get passed on to the patients and to the consumers. We are tracking these two pieces of legislation very closely this morning. We'll keep our eye on them over on our website, carolinajournal.com, and right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. In some other news this morning, North Carolina has once again ranked high on the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America's list for the most challenging places to live with seasonal allergies. Raleigh is ranked the seventh most challenging place to live in America with allergies. Greensboro ranked in as 10, Charlotte at number 18, Winston-Salem 15, so many North Carolina cities cracking the top 20. These North Carolina cities are all considered to have worse than average seasonal allergies. And for the third year in a row, Wichita, Kansas, which I would not have guessed, is the most challenging city for pollen allergies. Spring in North Carolina brings an abundance of pollen starting in late February, especially from trees, grasses, and weeds, making it tough for residents with allergies. The worst months for allergies in North Carolina are April for tree pollen, May for grass, and September for weed pollen. The daily pollen forecast currently indicates high levels across most of the nation. As the warmer weather arrives, the report factors in pollen scores, the use of the over-the-counter medications, and availability of allergists, all of which paint a challenging picture for North Carolinians in the spring. As somebody that deals with seasonal allergies, probably like many of you, it has been a rough couple of weeks, but let alone don't be concerned with North Carolina, many cities ranking on the top 20 cities with the worst allergies across the nation. Pretty interesting report. You can read additional details this morning by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com, or it's now 5:39 and News Talk 1110. 99.3 WBT. As we look at different generations and how they vote politically, we've got some new information this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour about Gen Z. Where will they fall on the political spectrum compared to liberal or conservative? To get some more details on that this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Brianna Kraemer from carolinajournal.com to the News Hour this morning. Seems like every time we have this new generation name, whether it be Gen Z, Y, X, Boomer, whatever generation we want to use, Brianna, they tend to have a core political leanings. What are we learning about this youngest generation?
Yeah, so we took a look at the data on the State Board of Elections website to determine what exactly is going on in the youngest voter registration group. And it looks like the political leanings among young North Carolina voters have indicated a shift towards more conservative viewpoints, as Republican registrations among 18 to 25-year-olds grew significantly between 2020 and 2024, while at the same time, Democrats have seen a decline in Gen Z voters over the same period. So what it looks like from the data is that Gen Z is trending more conservative, and that really comes amid a surplus of alternative media sources that we are seeing, and access to different viewpoints online and on social media. There's a lot of different resources that Gen Z has that different generations haven't had access to. And so just indicates that maybe Gen Z's looking at things a little differently than other generations have in the past.
And I'm glad you brought up social media. I think it's fair to assume the younger you are, the more likely you are to not only just use social media as a passer-buyer, but probably be more engaged in that conversation online. We've seen some major shifts over at X, what used to be Twitter, with Elon Musk's purchase. There's some rumblings and some conversation about changes over at Meta, Facebook, with Mark Zuckerberg. So it does seem like if individuals are wanting to get some of this content that maybe in years past was shadow banned or removed from the platform, Brianna, it seems like some of that stuff might actually be available now.
Oh, that certainly is the case. But it's also interesting when you look at the demographics a little bit between men and women. So just to break down the numbers a little bit more for everyone, Republican voter registrations among this age group, 18 to 25, showed a net gain of 10,912 young Republicans over that 4-year span from 2020 to 2024. And that includes 17,400 young men and then 5,000 young women. That contributed to the growth, while there was also a decline from undisclosed voters. But all in all, about 10,900 new young Republicans. And like I just mentioned, a vast majority of young men, actually. So that's a driving cause, is men in this age group. And so we also looked at the Democrat side, I should point out, in this age group, and that decreased by 39,000 total.
Wow.
So Republicans went up about 11,000, Democrats down 39,000 for Gen Z voters. So very interesting overall. But again, back to the men versus women, it just looks like social media, the times we're living in now, it's important to also remember this generation was in high school and college during COVID, and had to deal with lockdowns and mask mandates, and I think saw a lot more government involvement or community involvement around them because of stuff like that, a health emergency. And so there's been a lot of different impacts, of course, on how they may be trending more conservative. But for men in particular, social media, and when you look at podcasts, I think that's another interesting thing to bring up. Shows like Joe Rogan, who he predominantly appeals to men, especially young men, and that could definitely be a driving force as well in this shift in ideology among young voters.
Well, and you look at some of the guests that Joe Rogan has had on over the last couple of months, individuals like Elon Musk, like J.D. Vance, Trump himself, back just a couple of weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook and Meta. So I guess it makes sense that if some of these younger men are predominantly listening to shows like Joe Rogan, that's where they're falling into. What do you think? There's this term that was used a lot, and it's not as popular anymore, Brianna, but there was this idea of toxic masculinity, right? If you are a young man, inherently that you have this toxic masculinity that you bring to every conversation and every room that you step in. You think that plays into this as well? These younger men are just sick of being immediately deemed bad or not in favor because they just happen to be a man. You think that plays into it as well?
Yeah, I certainly would think that would play a role in changing their outlook, because they've been hearing that for years on end. And so, maybe that appealed to females on the left. And for years, maybe that was a talking point of toxic masculinity. But that also had a direct response. Then you can see that from men, and young men are, kind of showing through this data that maybe that's not working out so well, because that's just not coming off in a way that they are happy about. And so they're reacting and going to the conservative side because they don't want to be seen as some evil, toxic masculinity talking point from the left. So I think that definitely plays a role into why maybe they might be banding together more, this age group and men in general, in kind of like a show of response to what has been leading up to this for years.
You've got some quotes as well as some of those graphs with numbers that we were talking about. Where do folks keep up to date? Where can they read that this morning?
Yeah, just head on over to carolinajournal.com and you can look at the chart and see all of the data in the article.
Brianna Kraemer joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 546, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time to get another look at traffic on your Tuesday morning. An update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you.
WBT and Tommy D Productions presents George Norrie Live, heading your way Saturday, April the 19th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Booth Playhouse in Charlotte. The legendary George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM will lead an interactive evening featuring a psychic therapist, Vincent Gina, dream interpreter and angelic researcher, Samantha Fay, and near-death experiencer, Danian Brinkley. The show will feature questions and answers from George and his guests, as well as a salute to our country's military veterans and first responders. To top it off, Bo and Beth will be there to say hello as well. It's all presented in part locally by Monica the Medium at the Healing Tree Boutique, who will be on site offering readings for a special price. It's George Norrie Live, Saturday, April the 19th at the Booth Playhouse. Visit WBT.com for tickets and details this morning. It's now 5:22 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We've had a lot of court decisions over the last few weeks. This morning, we turn our attention back to the North Carolina Supreme Court, who is set to take another look at a case springing from the MAP Act. The now repealed state law allowed the Department of Transportation to limit the development of properties in designated highway corridors. The state Supreme Court ruled that the MAP Act was unconstitutional back in 2016, and the current dispute involves payments to property owners affected by the MAP Act's restrictions. The highest court issued orders last week on Friday agreeing to take up two MAP Act cases, Sanders v. the North Carolina Department of Transportation and Meta, M-A-T-A, versus the North Carolina Department of Transportation. DOT had urged the Supreme Court justices last August to take the Mata case. The department warned that the lower court ruling in the case could, quote, create confusion in the future with the MAP Act lawsuits. In a split 2-1 decision last July, the State Court of Appeals ordered a trial judge to revisit the amount of money DOT must pay to resolve two MAP Act disputes in Wake County. While that could mean less money for the plaintiffs than the trial court originally ordered, appellate judges rejected DOT's argument that MAP Act restrictions should be treated as indefinite rather than temporary. The distinction could lead to significant differences in the amount that DOT must pay to resolve outstanding cases. DOT lawyers filed a petition citing three reasons for the Supreme Court to take a look. First, they claimed that there is some conflict with the decisions from the Supreme Court in multiple cases. They also claimed that there are different measures of damages and that not all cases should be treated equally. And finally, they claim that current guidance is a bit unclear in regards to how the DOT operates going forward. The size of payments depend on, in part, whether the MAP Act's former restrictions on the use of property should be considered temporary or not. And in the two Wake County cases that we are discussing this morning, the MAP Act blocked any development on affected properties for nearly 20 years. So a major amount of time being blocked there. Appellate judges agreed with portions of rulings in the past, saying, quote, the trial court correctly found that the duration of these temporary orders taking place between 1996 and 2016 take place. The order of that trial court concluded that the duration of the temporary taking is affirmed. So this is a major discussion over what you can and can't do with your property. It is a very lengthy legal challenge that has been going on for quite some years. You really have to go back 20 plus years to when a lot of this started in regards to the MAP Act. You can read more details on this legal challenge, on this lawsuit, by visiting our website this morning at carolinajournal.com. In some news out of the General Assembly this morning, Senate Leader Phil Berger, the Republican out of Rockingham, has officially filed the DAVE Act. That's the Division of Accountability, Value, and Efficiency within the state auditor's office. That bill does require each state agency to report to the newly created division on how they spend taxpayer funds and instructs State Auditor Dave Bolick to put together a report by the end of the year on which state agencies and what jobs can be cut from state government. The Senate leader said in a press release, quote, "We want our state agencies to work as hard as the citizens that fund them. taking a comprehensive look at state agency spending and staffing to determine if they're working efficiently and effectively is the right thing to do. If they won't hold themselves accountable, then the General Assembly will have to do so. We took a poll in March over at CarolinaJournal.com. We asked the question, should the state government create a Department of Government Efficiency, or a DOGE department? And over 51% of North Carolina voters said that they were, in fact, in favor of creating an agency like DOGE. 51.9% saying yes, 40% saying no, with about 7.5% of the voters being undecided as to whether they wanted to move forward with this state agency. We've also heard some comments as of late from Governor Josh Stein about creating some sort of DOGE-like effort within his office, within his budget management office. We'll keep an eye on all of that over on our website, CarolinaJournal.com. Well, that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.